Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Director of the Swami at the Consulate General of India in Durban, Mr. Nirod Bramdeo, Professor Marian Kim, Ms. Diana Ferris, Ms. Tutu Gashe, Mr. Piyush Khandelwal, Mr. CPWM Chunu, Dr. Bhuvan Prakash Singh, distinguished guests and online viewers. Welcome to episode 4 of Pustakalok, A Light of a Book, an online series of book discussions. With today, we will be discussing the book Umama, Definitely Indeed, which it discusses the stalwarts of our community, the grandmothers and mothers of our society. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Nirod Bramdeo, an author, scholar, and diplomat, to introduce Umama. Welcome, Nirodji.
Many thanks, Shristi, and good morning to my fellow panelists. Thank you for the opportunity to share this important title with your wide audience. The book Umama is the first of its kind in South Africa, and a testimony to the fact that there is almost always a nurturing mother figure behind the exceptional role models of our society. Combined and edited by Marian Kame, who is joining us today, this collection of essays is a celebration of mothers and grandmothers of 40 great South Africans, thus engaging a reading public across race, class, gender, and age. Leaders in the areas of politics, business, music, sport, education, and literature pay homage to the women who have influenced and inspired them to lead exceptional lives. Mac Maraj remembers how his mother served everyone with unfailing courtesy and recognition of their dignity. Archbishop Desmond Tutu hopes he can resemble his mother's spirituality and emulate her generosity and kindness, while Pam Golding shares her mum's good advice: keep dancing and you'll stay out of trouble. Who raised the likes of Sibongile Khumalo or Anki Krog to extraordinary achievement, or Nelson Mandela, Lucas Hadebe, J.M. Coetzee, Helen Suzman, Yvonne Chaka Chaka, Zakes Mda, Ayanda Sisulu, Ilana Meyer, Peter Dirk Ace, Miriam Makeba, Ahmed Kathrada, and many more. Much of the answers to these questions lies in these heartwarming tributes contained in the pages of Umama. It is written in a very readable format and can be appreciated by readers from all walks of life or educational level. The call of the hour in South Africa right now is social cohesion, and Umama has a diverse list of contributors of all races and from a diverse walks of life and backgrounds. Many governments and municipalities have in their integrated development plan objectives that advocate a harmonious society that embraces its democratic freedom and fundamentally aims to cultivate equality in a community that is functional and caring. Similarly, Umama embodies a historically rich heritage and socially vibrant zeitgeist that is indicative of Ubuntu. Importantly, by focusing on mothers and the respect and reverence with which each of the prominent South Africans holds them, it raises, amongst other issues, a respect for the elderly and gender-based violence. Elder abuse is a growing crisis in South Africa, where the elderly are often either put out onto the street, physically abused, and sadly even raped. This book very justly addresses this issue by simply narrating the esteem which this range of South African leaders hold their mothers. Furthermore, by placing these women in a position of high regard, it demonstrates quite aptly how every woman in society should be respected. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, gender-based violence has escalated exponentially, with women on the receiving end of senseless attacks, rapes, and even murders. It is work such as these that engenders a mutual respect in society, and I have been egging Marian on to make this an ongoing project. Finally, I would like to say a huge thank you to Marian for entrusting African Sun Media with this important work, and to the organizers of today's webinar, the Indian government and the Indian Council for Cultural Relations. We appreciate this opportunity. And with that, I can hand over back to the program director, who will speak to the contributors and the editors.
Thank you so much, Niroji, for that really insightful introduction on the book Umama. We would like to welcome our first guest speaker this afternoon, and that is Professor Marian Kim. Marian G is the compiler and editor of Umama. Marian G is a professor at the University of the Western Cape and the chairperson for the Foundation for Sport, Development and Peace, an NGO focusing on the values, education, and sport and peace. She is also an advocate of the High Court of South Africa. She is passionate about sport development, peace, and community developing, focusing on women and the youth. She is a networker and mentor at heart and has coordinated numerous national and international sport development and peace projects for youth and women with the United Nations, UNESCO, IOC, Nelson Mandela Foundation, NY Roadrunners, and others. In the year 2018, the book Umama was turned into a 3 documentaries called Umama, the movie, episode 1 to 3, screened locally and internationally in New York, Botswana, and Geneva. We now welcome Professor Marian.
Thank you so much, Sresti, for the warm welcome in the road and everybody and the organizers. This is an amazing, amazing panel and an amazing opportunity. And we are really humbled to take part in this project from your cultural center. I read about it and I'm really impressed. And it's the values, I think. It's a value-based approach and it's the values that count. Umama is a very special product. I wouldn't even say product. It's a very special initiative. As a professor, you write, you publish your papers. But if somebody would ask me what the best output has been for myself, I would always say it's Umama. It has not much to do with academia. It is something. It's a work of the heart. And it's a homage to women in South Africa that have been my teachers over the years that I've been here. I came here when Nelson Mandela was released in 1990, and this is my home for 30 years. And Umama comes out of that, out of the women I met in the communities, out of the women I met as the mothers of our amazing leaders. I became a mother very late in life, when I was 41 with my first child. And you know how it is when you're young and then when you have a child and the child is young and then it's this overflowing love. And then all of a sudden you sit back and think, wow, we really live in a very new, rapidly changing world. It's filled with unknown and dangers and opportunities. And what do I give my child to become the best that he can be? How do we prepare our children? What values will they have? How will they survive in today's world? How can we guide them? How can we for them to become the best that they can be? And I was in the unique and amazing, humbling position to have Archbishop Tutu as our chancellor at the university. So I actually went to him and I said, what did your mom do for you to become the person that you are today? And then he said, sit down, I actually want to tell you a story about my mom. And that's how it started. And from that, I love stories. We all have stories to tell. Like Zakes Medar said in the beginning of our movies. Each of us in our life is a story. We are characters in a story. It's a story of life. And we share our human experiences and we learn from one another and learn from the mistakes and from the joys and from the sorrows. And that's how we become much better human beings. And I think we do not have enough recognition of the power and potential of motherhood on leadership and education in South Africa today. I believe the focus on mothers and grandmothers and their values is more important today than ever. And we need this kind of guidance. As you said, Umama is a collection of stories of women, of leaders from different paths of life. Most of the mothers had no education, but they valued education. They valued community spirit. And we can see whether in those interviews that I had, which was so humbling, whether it was in Amit Kathrada, we had the last interview before he passed, whether it was with Helen Suzman, whether it was with Miriam Makeba at that time, it was amazing, humbling stories that really told us what is important. And it is women who have influenced and inspired others and to lead those exceptional lives that we know our leaders lead. So those powerful stories and its stories of are captured in Umama. It's mothers and their courage, it's endurance, it's the triumph of love, and that should be an inspiration to all of us. And it also shows us that we are much more alike than we think, because we all have universal values, and we sometimes forget where they come from. Everybody knows Nelson Mandela's name. I don't know how many people know the name of his mom. And so the book celebrates women and mothers and grandmothers. We do not leave fathers out. Fathers play an equally important role. But this particular book really focuses on mothers and grandmothers. It also supports parents. It touches and connects and involves all of us in a very fundamental way. So it's an educational experience, and I was really, really fortunate that we got funding from the National Lotto Federation Association to turn the book then in 3 documentaries. And we were really humbled to be invited to the United Nations Social Forum to show it in Geneva, to show it at the Global Women's Summit in Botswana. We were invited to the International Peace Research Association in Ahmedabad in India, where we showed it in Gandhi's ashram, and that is one of the moments of my life where it was most humbling and very, very special to just have that connection. So yeah, and I think I would like to end with the little bit of a personal dedication of the book, because when as I said, when I became a mum, I thought of my mother and my grandmother and what my stories would be in the book. But this book is about South African leaders and recollections of their mums and their grandmom. But the book itself is dedicated to our daughters, Thandi and Joy, and all the children of South Africa, in the hope that as they grow up, they will see and feel and share and reciprocate the endless love of their mothers and grandmothers. And for their sake, when I compiled the book with the amazing, amazing human beings, when we interviewed them, Alvi Sachs, Amit Kathrada, I was in tears just by listening to the stories. When Prince Buthelezi says in his 80s, the most important person in his life was his mother. When Ahmed Kathrada said he didn't have a mother as itself because he was away from home, but he had so many women that played the mother role for him. When you hear those stories, so for this sake, I long for South Africa, and that's how I write in the dedication as well, of peace and of love and of care, where children can grow up safely, where mothers do not have to shed tears of sorrow and pain and fear for their children, where women are respected and honored for their lives that they play every day in their family, community, society, and for their contribution to our humanness. So it's about humanness, and it's about all of us, and it what brings us together. So I really, really appreciate the opportunity, especially so close to the holidays as well, to share Umama with you, the book, and then also the video Umama, the movie, is downloadable at YouTube. Namaste. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Marian, for compiling such a close to heart book. It's not just a book, it's feelings indeed. And that is why they say behind every successful man is indeed a woman. And that is, of course, his mother. That brings us to our next guest speaker this afternoon, and that is Miss Diana Ferris. Diana is a writer, poet, performance poet, storyteller. Her work has been published in various collections, and some serve as prescribed text for high school learners. In the year 2012, Diana received the inaugural Mabokodo Award for Poetry. Diana's third book, Die Vrede kwam later, was launched on 27 July 2019. We welcome Miss Diana Ferris for her remarks on the book Umama.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much. It is an honor for me to be on this platform. Thanks to you and to Professor Marion and to the Indian consulate. I want to say thank you very much. We are very connected to India, you know, through the workers that came, but also through the people that were enslaved that came to South Africa, to Cape Town in the 1700s. So we have a great connection with India that we don't always talk about. But there are many, many people in Cape Town with Indian roots that they don't know, because our stories of the time of slavery are not told lots. But it's wonderful to be here. And my story talks about my mom, and it's important for me, I think, when I was asked to write the story, that I write about the challenges that she had. And a story for me cannot be a story if, you know, the battles that we go through are not in there. Eventually, the victory is the great thing. And my mother was, as the story says, she was a very talented person, but you know, she married my father, who was a soldier, who was a prisoner of war during the Second World War. And I say in the story, he was a battle-scarred man. Yes, he had lots of post-traumatic stress that we were not aware of. And as I say in my story, my mother didn't understand him, I think, because he couldn't even understand himself. At that time, when he came from the war, there wasn't even such a word as post-traumatic stress. So for me, writing is about healing. And when I wrote the story, when I was asked to write the story, it was essentially about healing myself, because there was the difficulties of alcohol abuse. There was the difficulties of deprivation, a lot of deprivation as a result of apartheid, and I had to address this, even though it made me uncomfortable to write about it. I had to write about it. And this story, I must say, that I wrote for my mother was the start of a long journey. I wanted to talk about her, but talking about her forced me also to talk about my dad. My dad, book that I wrote for him came out last year. The book is called Die Vrede kom later, Peace Comes Later. And that is, that book talks about him and his post-traumatic stress and stuff that happened to him during the war. So the story of my mother, it was just the start of completing a narrative around me and where I come from. And it liberates me, and it frees me, and it helps me to write more and to write deeper, and also it helped me to understand life and to understand what other writers write. And that's why this book, Oh Mama, is so important, because one learns such a lot. Not every person, every woman's story is the same, but as Professor Marion said, there's such a lot of links that connect. Yeah, I would like to read a part from my story, if I may. She was the greatest cook, could create hearty meals from the simplest of foods. She was a perfectionist who taught us to wash, iron, and clean properly. My mother never bought on credit and worked wisely with the little money she had. I became the avid reader she was. As a young girl, I lay next to her and we read from the same book. She read faster than what I could, and many a time had to wait to turn the pages over because I was not done yet. Both she and my father loved poetry and recited it to us. Today, I am a poet and writer. I spend money wisely and hate to buy on credit. And even though I did not turn out to be a great cook, I do excel in frying fish and making soup, two of our specialities. I have many friends. I treat both adults and children with respect, traits she instilled in me. And when flashes of the hard times in our life threaten to ruin my day, I think of how she lifted herself from that pit. Then I think of how she tried to make up for the times she was not herself. And she did. Now in my adult life, I realize that no one has ever looked at me with such loveful eyes. My mother and I grew closer after the death of my father. That was when I truly discovered who she was, what she went through, and how remarkable she was. Many times I think of the shame I felt when my mother was drunk, times when I thought she ought to keep quiet. But today I am grateful that she spoke. My mother did not allow her family to harbor secrets. Everything had to be out in the open. It did bring shame at the time, but today I have nothing to hide, thanks to her. In 1994, we voted together. How appropriate that we could give our first steps of freedom together. Here is to my mother who will speak through me that day. On April 27, 1994, I took my mother's hand, for it was a new day in our land. She was 68 and I was 41. And as the morning sun made its daily run, we walked slowly, step by step. The roads were abuzz, but our minds were clear. A new day in our lives was here. On wobbly legs, she entered the hall, but with head held high, she suddenly looked so tall. I watched as she made a cross, as we regained the dignity that we had lost. That day, on April 27, 1994, I took my mother's hand, for it was a new day in our land. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Diana, for those beautiful memoirs of your mother. We've come to the next part of today's program where we'd like to introduce our third guest speaker, and that is Ms. Thandeka Tutu Gashe, who is the CEO of the Desmond Tutu Desk Campaign, a charitable educational organization which addresses more than 95 million desk shortages in the sub-Saharan Africa. She is committed to working to preserve peace, improve racial reconciliation, and ensure equality by improving the health and education experiences of young people, particularly in the sub-Saharan Africa. She's lived and worked and studied in the UK, USA, and several South African countries. We welcome Ms. Thandeka Tutu Gashe.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everybody, and thank you very much for having me on this panel. It's an honor to be here in the presence of such great people, and so thank you for having me. Thinking about Umama, it's such a special. It almost feels like it's my book too, because I've been through so many parts of it with Marion, with and apart from it, um, being such an easy book to read for one, which is great, but it's also touches on something that is so part of our human lives, because all of us have mothers. There is no one who came into this world. There's no possibility of anyone being in this world without a mother. Not to say nothing about fathers. We admit their small role in bringing us into this life too. But every single one of us has a mother. Every single one of us has a story to tell of their mother. And sometimes the stories are not necessarily not for every child is every story about their mother a great story, but every child to a greater or lesser extent sees something of themselves in they have taken from their mother. And the great thing about this book, because I think it's a beginning, because as much as everyone has a mother, everyone does have a father too. So I keep telling Marion that she still hasn't finished, because there's ubaba, utata still to come. And I'm not sure if she has started yet, but I certainly hope that she has. But talking about umama, I would hope that it actually becomes required reading in our schools, because the great thing about the book is that it makes you think about who you are, where you come from, and also give tribute to the ones who have brought you along the way, starting with your mother. The one great thing that I see as kind of as a recurring theme throughout the Umama stories, and different as they are, and and diverse as the mamas are in the book. One of the things that I seem to pick up on is the importance of education and the importance of children being educated so that they have choices in life. I'm not sure if that's what has put me into working with Tutu Desk, but one of the things that I do know, and that I tell people a lot when I go and speak about or fundraise for Tutu Desk, is part of the reason that I do it is because education is so important in my father's, well, both my parents' lives. Not many people know that they began their professional lives as teachers. And it was only when the apartheid system brought in Bantu education, and they felt that they could no longer be part of that system of teaching African children and giving them an education that was designed to make them no more than serfs in their country, that my father actually left teaching and went into the priesthood, and my mother left teaching and went into nursing. And so I feel that, what is basically, my father is still a teacher at heart. And he was an English teacher. And I mean, he will correct you at, all of the time when when you're telling him something, and then he'll correct your pronunciation, or even on email, he'll correct your spelling. And I said, but who does that? Who corrects people's spelling on email? And so that's part of the teacher in him. And so what I feel is that there's so many legacies in his name that to peace and reconciliation, but there's nothing actually in the education sphere. And so the Tutu desk, which I work with, is kind of a legacy of or an educational legacy. And the great thing about many of the mamas in the Umama book is their determination for their children to be educated, because through education they are going to get out of poverty, cycles of poverty, or they are going to make a better life for themselves than those mamas were able to give to their children, because they may would not have been educated. Like my grandmother was a laundry, she washed people's laundry, and but she was married to a school principal, and her children all became educated, and that's a recurring theme, that all mothers want the best that they can for their children. And one way of helping them to do that is to become educated. And so I thank Marion for this wonderful book, because it gives you a chance to sit down and take stock, and also to give thanks for not just your own mother, but the many mothers who mother you along the way and keep you going and enable you to mother other people's children too. And so thank you for having me on this panel, and thank you, Marion, for this awesome book, and I wait eagerly for Udata.
Thank you so much, Thandekaji, for your heartfelt remarks today and for inspiring us through the Tutu desk. We've come to the next part of the program, where I invite Dr. Bhuvan Prakash Singh for his remarks.
Namaskar and good day to the Indian Consulate team, as well as my erstwhile panelists. I must say it's absolutely humbling to be in your presence. And just listening to you, I think from a literary point of view, there's a whole lot of emotions that well up. Because while we're talking about a piece of literature, to me, literature means nothing if it doesn't mirror life. And I think this is one of the closest we could get to an appreciation of life through literature. And that's the dedication to our mothers and grandmothers through an initiative such as Umama. For me, there's very little that has not been said, but I just want to start off with, saying a few things by reading a quote from Wally Morrow, which is on page 124 of the book. And it reads as, and I quote, "Their influence is woven into the tapestry of who we are. Such influence is exceptionally difficult to disentangle from our sense of our own personal identity, or to articulate in terms of causes and effects. This is a mode that is the bread and butter of good historians." I unquote. If you just look at that, the question would be, even in terms of whatever our fellow panelists have said, how do you determine the influence of your mother or your grandmother on you? How do you articulate it? How do you put it in words? It's very, very difficult, unless to say that they are an integral part of who we are and who we will be, and they will live through us. I just want to concentrate on a few of the more boring stuff, like a few comments on the writers in this particular book. They're very high-profile achievers, and I think Nirod has mentioned that, so have Prof and the other speakers. And in terms of high-profile activists and leaders in our country, and even nationally, we sometimes see people professional point of view. But what the book of Mama does is gives us the humane and the personal view and look into the lives of these very influential people. It makes them human in our eyes as well. You know, sometimes when we look at great leaders, we see them as profiled up there, out there, and we pull this little cocoon around them. And we don't see them as human beings. And this book actually makes us look at these human beings who are great leaders, but also how they soften when they think of the parents and the mother in particular. I think for all of us, the mother has a special place in our hearts. And no matter where we go and what we do, like in the case of Lucas Hadebe, no matter where he went, he became such a great soccer writer. His mother said, don't forget your roots. As Tandeka mentioned just now, the influence of our parents in terms of education and the emphasis they placed on it. This is very, very heartening because you look at the case of Qadir Asmal in this book. He makes a point that his mum was uneducated in terms of the norm that we use, but he became the National Minister of Education in this country. So the weaknesses of our mums become our strengths as people, and that's what these leaders have actually indicated. And I think, as I said, it's not where you start from that's important, it's where you end up. And the influence of the mum, especially as the one who keeps the house together. There are many instances where the mum is also looked at as wife and friend in terms of support for the father. And her being the anchor of the house comes through very strongly. And what I like and really cherish about this book is it makes us look at ourselves. The stories are those of other people, but the stories of ourselves as well. And at this point in time, if I may do some ambush marketing, but just to say that I really related to this book because the little piece that I wrote called When the Chalk is Down was also influenced by my mum. And she was no great world leader, not really of high standing, but she was a mum of 7 children who through great hardship brought up, us in this world. And when we look at the issue of what is a hero or a heroine in this case, in the eyes of many of us, our mums are, because we are because of them. And I think that's a very, very important point. If you look at what Nirod said at the outset of Umama, if you look at what's happening in South African society now, and even in terms of the world, internationally, the atrocities that are meted out to women. These women are our mothers, our grandmothers, our aunts, our sisters, our nieces and nephews. And Umama helps us to introspect. And that is phenomenal of a piece of literature. Because any piece of literature, good literature, is a catalyst for discussion and debate. It's not the story that is put in paper that is important more than the discussion that emanates from it, like this particular panel, for example. And that is phenomenal. In terms of the writing style, I just want to say it's a very easy book to read. Yeah, the message is profound, but it's an easy read, and I did support the idea that perhaps it should, if not a set work at school level, at least at school libraries, it should be there. Mama's wife and friends, their mama's strong characters. I always remember this one issue of Sishla Kumalo saying how his mom would beat him for any so-called naughtiness. But yet when there was thunder and lightning in the form of a storm, his mom was absolutely scared. So these leaders that we look at when we are children are also humane in that way. And so the writing is tinged with serious stuff, yes, but also a great deal of amusement, which makes good literature. So it makes light reading of heavy issues as well, which is fantastic. Our moms, many of them have been depicted as role models and great teachers, sometimes not always in the profession of teaching, but in terms of the values and the norms that, they actually taught us with. Moms as politicians, the issue of Mrs. Amina Pahad, at a time when women were supposed to be at home taking care of the children while the men were out there. She was one of the first female activists that was locked up. And you've had 3 of her sons becoming national politicians in the country. So that is an actual case of saying that women have been in leadership positions, although in a patriarchal society, but in the small way that they could. They've been large parts of our lives influencing what we've done, like in the case of Nelson Mandela as well. I would just like to say, what is the messaging to our readers? As I said, a book is of value if it gives a message to us. I think the whole issue of cherishing our people, starting at home, we always say charity starts at home. But the issue of respect and appreciation should start in the home, should start with our elders, should start with our parents. And Umama actually helps us to tap that little conscience that says, let's not take our parents for granted, especially our mothers. Let's look at the sacrifice they made for us, and let's start being a little more appreciative of the way they are. And we always say it's good to write about your parents and praise them when they're gone. They're not with us any longer when they did. But I think Mama tells us we should appreciate those when they are alive and alive. They're an integral part of us. Farida Karodia, for example, I like herself writing, but she says, if only, if only, if only, the issue of regret. There's so many of us regret not appreciating our moms, especially when they are gone. And so in this way, Mama tinges on our, or tugs at our conscience to say, let's appreciate the here and the now. If you look at every aspect of our life, I think the issue of appreciation comes through. All our panelists have said what they have said. And I think it's a wonderful piece of literature that every one of us should read because of its humaneness. But Shristi, as I conclude, I just want to say, if we can get Prof. Marian just the opportunity to indicate to us in parting the vision of the book, because there was a very serious vision in the writing of the story, I think it will take us forward. But thank you so much. I'm truly honored to have been part of this panel.
Thank you so much, Dr. BP Singh, for constantly inspiring us and educating us through your writing, and for being such a dynamic educator in society. Thank you so much, sir, for promoting culture as well. Marianji, I would like to welcome you again to just share with us the vision on the book Umama.
Thank you so much, Christy. When I left Germany 30 years ago, it was my dad who told me, if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going. So wherever you go in the world, even if you go and move to South Africa, always remember where you come from and your mother and your grandmother. And in my case, my grandmother actually lost her husband in the war. He never came back. So it was a heavy story for us too. I ended up at the University of the Western Cape, which has the motto, rest is prosperous. You have to first look back in order to look forward. So it just somehow came together for me. But when the book came out and also the movies, the vision was, and Thandi has mentioned it already, that those stories go to our youth. They inspire our communities. So we have started actually even in prisons and in schools having reading circles with it. And so it's a book and even a DVD that we're starting. But in going to our schools, going to our libraries would be one, to all of our, because these are leaders from all ways of life, and they should be in all school libraries. The second is also to the listeners to write the second vision, to write their own stories about their own mothers and grandmothers and fathers and grandfathers. And this is a time during COVID, and it's Thanksgiving today, of like appreciating and looking down to what really matters. And do I want to leave a story for my child or my grandchild about my mother and my grandmother? So this is something that I really hope that stories come out of the stories. And the third would be, it's projects for the communities. It's those discussions that Dr. Singh also mentioned just now that are necessary about who we are and where we want to be as a people, as a society, as a global community. And so, Umama, I have the vision to not only maybe coming out from South Africa, but with the help of partners, it could be an Africa-wide project, it could be a global project to have those discussions. It would do wonders for violence against women. It would do wonders for us coming together, observing the Sustainable Development Goals of partnership and peace. So that's my vision. I think Umama is just a little trigger that can go very wide. Thank you so, so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Marianji, once again. Indeed, what an apt day, Thanksgiving, and the book Umama pays tributes to all beautiful mothers out there in this world. We've come to the conclusion of episode 4 for Pustakalok, a series of online book discussions. I'd like to now introduce Mr. Sipiwe Mchunu from the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban to render this afternoon's vote of thanks. Sipiwe ji.
Namaskar. Good afternoon to all of you. At the Consulate General of India, vote of thanks on today's episode program Pustakalok, meaning the light of the book. And today's discussion was a book called Umama. Following guest who participated on today's program Pustakalok, Sri Nirod Bramdo. Thank you very much for your sterling introduction on the book Umama, and also Professor Marion Kim for giving a wonderful remarks on the book. Miss Diana Ferros for giving us a great remarks on the book Umama. Miss Chandeka Tutu Rashe for great remarks also that she made on the book. And lastly, Dr. BP Singh for his sterling remarks on the book Umama. On this book, I was touched and I was also remembered that there is no need for all of us to appreciate the end product that we see in front of us and forget those who molded that end product we are appreciating. As of today, Professor Marunji and the team, whenever I see a great soul, a great human being, I will appreciate the molder also, the person who had the passion of molding that person. So the story was very touching. To all of you, I'm saying, Dhanyavad, thank you very much. To Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center team, Dr. Prakash Chaitanya Yogi, Sristi Harinarayan, Sri Piyush Khanderwal, for making sure that today's program, it is a successful story. Lastly, to our online viewers, please, we appreciate you to join us on today's program. Please visit our Facebook page so that you'll be updated about all our upcoming events. On that note, to all of you good people, have a wonderful day. Namaskar.